Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special episode of L&D Disrupt. Now, if your inbox or LinkedIn feed has been anything like mine this week, you'll have seen a lot of talk about Slack's recent week-long hiatus that's dedicated to learning. It was actually announced in October, but the story has been doing the rounds again recently and actually sparked some really nice, interesting takes and debates. So I wanted to talk through this approach, and I'm pleased to say our amazing head of people at HowNow, Pauline Taylor, has joined me to have that discussion. Pauline, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, Gary. How are you?
I'm good. Precursor to this, very quick side story. I actually had a dream that we were trying to record this last night, and then things kept getting interrupting us, including someone reversing into my car outside my house. So I really hope my dream isn't going to be coming
It's
to
not
life.
going to happen. No, I hope so too. No cars on your driveway.
It was very weird. Such a weird dream. I've had lots of weird dreams. Perfect. So yeah, like I said, we want to talk through this approach from Slack today and not really go for a pylon of Slack and get on the back of them, but to talk about why the approach might not necessarily have been the most optimal. And if anyone hasn't seen the story, I just want to set a little bit of context. There's a great HR Grapevine article that I will link in a description, but I'll just talk through a couple of the key parts of that now. So the first being that Slack employees would go on a 1 week hiatus, dedicating their time to earning something called Ranger status through Salesforce's Trailhead online learning platform. What Ranger Week entails is employees temporarily putting aside their regular work duties to delve into various modules offered by Trailhead. The ultimate goal is for Slack's workforce to achieve Trailhead's Ranger status, which is a distinction requiring approximately 40 hours of online learning. The modules span a wide range of topics, from learn about the fourth industrial revolution to healthy eating. And Slack CEO Lydianne Jones said that, "I know this will disrupt and slow V2 month-over-month progress for many of us, but we are making this a priority now so we can quickly get back to working on our roadmaps." So like I said, the conversation around this has been really kind of good faith and people offering constructive feedback. And yeah, that's kind of what we're going to try and do today, just talk about the flaws maybe in the approach or some of the things that we think could have been improved. So Pauline, I guess first of all, the thing we know and we talk about a lot internally is people want to learn on the job in the flow of work, but I don't think this necessarily helps do that. And it also doesn't help with the perception of L&D dragging people out of the workflow and shutting everything else down and making this feel like something very separate. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like you said, look, it's not against Slack. I think we have to applaud what they're trying to do. So number one, they've noticed there's a skills gap in their workforce. And number two, they know that the biggest excuse people give is that they don't have enough time to learn. And we've talked about this in other podcasts. People saying they don't have enough time to learn means that they're not prioritizing that learning because they don't understand what they need to learn or the skills they need to learn. So by them Slack saying, right, we're going to give you a week or 40 hours, which is 8 hours a day, to just go and learn everything you can, it's ultimately you're walking them into a library and saying, just go and learn what you want out of thousands. And we know that LMSs have thousands of courses. So really, you're not giving them a purpose. So what is the purpose of them learning? What are they going to get out of this learning? And actually for the company, and it might not be in this article, so we are making assumptions, but what are the company trying to achieve out of this? And we can talk more about, what it might be that they're trying to achieve, but it's not really clear. And I hope for the employees that it is clear when they've given this 40 hours that the purpose for it has been made clear for them, because otherwise there's too much choice. It's too overwhelming.
Yeah, I think part of it, like you said, is what is the purpose? And can only speculate, but if it's similar to a lot of the online course libraries we've seen, then we kind of know people are potentially doing things like knowledge checks within the course, but how much is it transferring to real world application? And I think what is the expected outcome for the employees beyond getting that tick of the time spent, which is kind of the first kind of question I had as well.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And also with the platform, it's very gamified. This is why they like it, because it's gamified. And when you think about if someone says to you, you've got to get to this status, which should take you 40 hours. What people are going to do is they're going to go, oh, I don't want to spend 8 hours a day learning something. I'm going to go on and find out where the quickest courses are or where I can get the most points. You know, you always go for, when you're doing gaming, how am I going to get 20 points instead of 5? I'm going to go for that. So people, they might not even be tapping into the skills that they want to because they're gamifying it, which I think does semi-work, but not in this context. You can't just say, we need you to be Ranger status, because people are smart. People will go, well, how can I get a shortcut here? How can I do that within 20 hours instead of 40 hours, so I can spend the rest of that 20 hours either doing the work that you've stopped me doing, so I'm not having to do that when I go back from the week, or so I can, you know, go and have a coffee or do something else instead of sitting in front of my screen 8 hours a day. So I think, like we always say, Gary, in the flow of work, when you're learning, you need to apply that learning, the learning that you would take. If you don't apply it within a 24-hour period, it's not going to embed into you. You can do as much online as you like, but if you're not applying that in your flow of work, it's going to go from your brain, because your brain can't hold on to that knowledge if it's not being used. It's, you know, your brain is amazing. It will not remember things that it's not utilizing.
Yeah. I think the gamify one is really interesting, actually, because if you think about a lot of videos now that are embedded from other places, there'll be an option to watch it on 2 times speed, which for some people works. For other people, it's a way to get through the course quicker, right? And say if I can watch a 20-minute video in 10 minutes, then I could reach a 40-hour target far sooner. But like you said, I guess the bigger question is, where has context been overlooked? You know, what are the formats that are working for these people? How are they actually going to apply that in their job? Have they been given the time and space, like you said, to practice it, to embed it, to be creative with the things they're learning? I think that seems like the main thing that's been overlooked from the outside, is how can we add the right context to where people want to learn? And I think that's the whole point about learning in the flow of work. We know people are motivated in the flow of work because it's real world challenges they're encountering, and anything they do learn in the flow of work gives them a chance to apply it, and then hopefully it influences performance. So I do think context is something that maybe overlooked a little bit as well.
Yeah, definitely. There needs to be context. And if Slack don't have a skills framework where people go, right, I know I need to brush up on presentation skills or Excel skills, whatever that is, machine learning. There are so many components of a skill. If you said to someone, we need you to brush up on communication, that's such a vast skill. What part of communication do you need me to brush up on? And I think if you left someone to kind of make that own assessment on their own, that's really hard. They could be watching a whole hour-long course and only 10 minutes of that course is applicable to the skill that they need to justify. Or most LMSs, they don't have a competency rating. So you'd go on and research a course, but it wouldn't say, well, actually, this is if you're at a competency level 4 or 5. So you don't know what you're looking at. What you really need is a bit of help and coaching from those people above you, or your manager or other people who are experts in that area, to say, do you know what? This is what I found useful. And it might not be an online course. It could be a book. It could be a podcast. People learn in different ways. So I think there needs to be, like you said, a purpose behind what are they trying, like it goes back to what are they trying to do? Are they doing this because they hit panic because their retention is low and most of their talented people are leaving because they haven't got career progression? Is it because there's a project that they're finding that they can't resolve because there's a skills gap? What is it that they're trying to solve with giving people these hours? And also, they need to realize that people are different, and an individual, there might be an individual in your team 5 years to retirement that goes, do you know what? There is nothing else I want to learn. I just want to do my job well. I don't want to be a trailblazer. Like, I just want to do what I need to do. And there'll be other people who are out of university and, you know, they're all for this. But you need to know that this one-stop shop of giving people 40 hours in so many different reasons, it's just not the way, in my opinion, it's not the way to solve a skills gap.
Yeah, I think you're right as well, actually, about that thing about timing. Like, where is someone in their career and their life, or what are their external circumstances right now? You know, we could roll this out. It could happen to any company, but you could roll it out. And what if like 70% of your people, for whatever reason, aren't in the right place to be doing this big batch of learning. I might have just entered my first job. It could be entry level. And actually, I'm already trying to assimilate all the stuff I'm learning on the job about my new job. Like you said, I could be right at the end of my career and I'm okay now, right? I'm as smart as I'm going to be. I don't necessarily want to learn new things because I'm winding down, or I just might have a lot going on in my personal life and it will feel like a big burden to spend all this time like learning and using that mental capacity back to back without necessarily having a break and that kind of stuff being considered. So there's a real timing element here. I think when you roll out a blanket approach, that makes it challenging for people to feel like it's relevant to them, because, you know, if it's being kind of put on everyone, then it's not necessarily someone sat down with you and gone, well, what do you want to learn? And like you said, is there kind of structure? And actually, that's a nice segue into the other point we wanted to discuss on this, is how relevant is the content? You know, I'm sure the article has kind of used the most outlier course titles there, but things about the fourth industrial revolution and healthy eating, I mean, that might be useful for me, but how tied is it to my progress and my performance? Because we know more than ever, people do want that purpose in the way they work, and especially in the way they learn. How is this going to help me do my job better? How is it going to help me build the skills that are going to keep me relevant, especially with this data we discussed before about how overwhelmed people are by the changing skills landscape. So I really do think there's a relevance here thing, that what's the structure, what's the purpose, and how much free rein are they giving people versus how much structure is being sort of given with that instruction to go and get the ranger status.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there does need to be some structure there. So I would have hoped there was some collaboration before they set everyone up on their 40 hours to say, like, these are the skills that we require, this is where we're lacking, and this is why we're having this business problem, or this is why you're not a senior, or this is why you're not developing in your career, and having a conversation together to say, what can we do to help you? But it doesn't seem like that is, because like just sending everyone on this online Trailblazer course just seems like that wouldn't be the solution for it, for everyone's situation. So I think when it comes to learning, it's very unique. Everyone has a different set of skills and it's very unique to one person. So it comes back to the point where it just can't be a one-stop shop for all. And also to think about, before you even send them on this 40 hours, what are the outcomes that you're trying to get from this? It has to always come back to the goal. What are the outcomes? Is it because you just want to hit 40 hours and tick the box to say, right, everyone's reached this? But how are you assessing that? How are you saying, right, Gary, you've done 20 hours on public speaking on this platform. Your competency is going to go to a level 5 because you've done 20 hours. Well, actually, you may have watched 20 hours, but can you public speak any better? So how is that being assessed and applied?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's clear. You can't just say because people have done the hours, and it goes back to how L&D with the completion rates. Just because you've got completion rates and people have done the courses doesn't mean that they're the best in that skill. It's how you apply that for better business outcomes. That is the true goal and the true result that the businesses are looking for. And again, let's go back to the point. They're taking people away from their day-to-day work for this training. So it needs to be that they know they're going to get business better outcomes by doing this, by taking that group of people away for 40 hours, 1 week of work. Is that going to be more beneficial to the company reaching its successes than them learning on the job, or just having more scattered learning or on the job in the flow of work learning? So I think all of those things need to be thought about.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you said, we can only speculate. It doesn't seem like that's the impression from the article, but what we could say is a better real world example is that we're going to do this 40-week thing, but we sit down with every person and we say, these are the business outcomes your role can influence, and these are the skills we think you need to build these business outcome related sort of proficiencies that we, you know, if we're going to get to this point, these are the skills we need and the levels of proficiency we need. And then if it's targeted and you say, well, okay, let's go through the list of courses together, and then you go away and do that, that's a good step. But I totally agree with this. It's not a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, you don't become better by doing the course. It's what you do after. And actually public speaking is a good example, because I've been going to Toastmasters for about a year, and there's quite a high churn rate. You know, people who come for a few months and go, and they've got what they want out of it. But there's people who maybe join and they come to an odd session and they don't come back and, you know, being signed up to Toastmasters doesn't give you the skill, but coming to each session, applying the things you're learning, using the resources outside of it, that's how you do it. Like doing the thing is how you become better at it, I find. For the majority of people, especially, there's a lot of things we're just not good at, especially when we're starting out. So having the repetitions to apply it is what would help me. But every time I've kind of done a course and then never been able to apply it, I think to your earlier point, so much of it just seeps out of my brain. And if I do a course too fast, I don't get the chance to apply it. Like if someone said to me, I want you to spend 40 hours over the next 20 weeks, 2 hours a week doing this course, I would build in these kind of self-application mechanisms where I'd say, right, this week I covered this. How can I go to my job and do that? And it speaks actually to the point you made earlier. That's what people do often, or to my experience with things like podcasts and webinars. I learned this thing from a webinar. I want to try that now in my job. And because it's bite-sized and feels relevant, then it's more likely to happen. So I do think there's a real, I think that would be the goal state. If you're going to do this thing with the big time block, then how are you setting people up to go and make the most of it and then apply it so they build the skills, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. And then talking with them to say, like, we're going to give you a project after you finish this course so you can apply that. And this is the outcome. So like you said, actually setting an outcome. And like you said, when you learn something, I've been on LinkedIn Learning, I've been on LMS platforms. And I think the dropout is because actually you think that course is going to teach you something. You get halfway through it and you're like, that's not how I like to learn. It could be because of the way the speaker's teaching you, because it's not engaging. But and then even if there are things that I'm learning and I'm writing notes and I'll put them to one side and think that's really important, unless I'm doing that piece of work, I forget about it. And I think, oh, what was it that I learned? Like what was this metric that I should know, or this Excel formula? But your brain, you have to go back to, again, the science of how people learn. People just don't retain knowledge unless they're using it. So they could be learning loads of good stuff on this platform, which is amazing that they have this platform. But I think you could use this platform, but in the flow of work. You know, by saying by looking at your line manager, and maybe your line manager is a great presenter and he's your role model or she's your role model. And you go, right, I want to be like them. What are the traits that I like from that person that I can take away? Now, how can I get them best? And it might be that then you go on to one of these courses, but then your manager would say to you, right, you're going to next present in the all hands. So let's get you ready for that so you can apply that learning. And what does that bring? That encourages other people. So to really focus on the metrics to show that that's going to be a good outcome. So what's a good outcome of you being a better presenter, Gary? We get more followers. People see you as a role model. People feel more confident because they see you're doing it and they think, I can do it. So I think there needs to be kind of outcomes on the skills that you're learning as well.
Yeah. No, I really like that. And actually, it reminds me of what you said about why people drop out of courses, because I think sometimes when we lack structure, we just go in with a loose idea. I want to improve my skill in SEO. This is a good example, actually. I won't name check the course because some people might find it useful. But recently I was like, right, there's parts of SEO that I would really like to hone in on a bit more. So I found this course. It was free, started doing it. But 4 or 5 modules in, I realized this was for a specific niche. So the transferability to my role wasn't that great, but by that point I've watched 5 modules of the course, so I'm kind of like an hour in. So there's this sunk cost by going in with too much of a loose mindset, and maybe I need to go and apply some of the stuff we spoke about here to myself and be self-aware. But to go in with a very loose mindset of what you want to get out of a course means that you don't find the right course for you. Because if I nail down to say, this is the thing I need to improve to do better at my job, I can find the course related to that thing. If I go very fluffy, I want to improve X skill, then of course I'm just going to go and find a potentially irrelevant course. And that is interesting. I'm only thinking about that now, but that is a real example of how, I think having that mindset for yourself is a great way to be better at that.
Yeah, and it doesn't make it easy because LMSs, they don't give it a competency level, like I said before. So like I think you're amazing at public speaking, by the way, but I think if you were like, I want to get more tips and tricks, I need a competency level of 5, like the best about public speaking. If you went and searched on an LMS, they don't rate it at competency levels. You have to read an overview, which, to be honest, when you're really busy and you're just looking for something, you kind of skim through the overview and then you start the course. And it's then, I've been in the same boat, Gary. I've been halfway through a course, which is really basic, but I'm halfway through it anyway. So I'm like, oh, I might as well just watch the rest. But actually, it's too basic for me. But it on my record, it would show that I've done this. But have I learned anything from it? No, because it's the wrong level for me. So I think, it needs to be really thought about. And LMSs, you can use them. I have used them, but it needs to be in the flow of work. It needs to be, I have a problem, I might go on to Google, or I might ask you the question. It needs to be in that instant. I have a problem. I'm really struggling with this. Let me learn about what I need to learn now. And I think that's how people learn now. And that's what we always shout about. But that's the reality, that people learn now every day in the flow of work. And it could be that it takes you to LMS, but it's not all embedded within one platform for 40 hours. Why is that trailblazer status anyway? Who stipulated that 40 hours is enough of learning? For one thing, I don't know where that comes from. I think you learn every day anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that leads nicely on to a little bit more around purpose, because it does seem like time is maybe become an arbitrary thing. And I know it's, the focus is the CEO saying we want everyone to be upskilled this year, but it seems to be the ultimate target is the time one. And I think that kind of overlooks that motivation for people. Like we said earlier, people want to learn stuff that's purposeful. And are we really understand what's in it for that individual? Like the marketing acronym, what's in it for me, WIFM, is such a true one that's been consistent for so long, because anything you want to resonate with an audience, it has to connect to that motivation. And I think maybe it's easy to overlook when you do time blocking. Is it that you understand the motivation for that person and therefore they're going to go in with the right mindset? Because also that's part of this here, right? If we don't understand someone's motivation, we can't frame it to them in the right way. When they enter this period of time blocked learning, are they coming in with the mindset of they know what they want to get out of it? Or are they coming in with like, right, I've been told to do this thing, I need to do it. And I think that would be the other thing, I think, is are they really getting to the bottom of what motivate each person? And are they also considering, if we don't do that, what impression does that leave of learning in everyone's mind? If 80% of the people do feel that this has kind of been foisted upon them, and now they have to do it as a tick box, that's 80% of people who might become disengaged in learning. Whereas if we could switch the 80-20 around and we sat down and we knew 80% of people's personal motivation and gave them that structure, not only would they perform better, they'd also have a longer lasting, more positive impression of what learning means in their business.
Yeah. And you need to give people choice. And I understand what they're trying to do here, because I'm sure, like looking at engagement surveys or leaver exit interviews, most people leave for career progression, or the biggest thing they will say is that I don't have time to learn, I'm not getting career progression. But you kind of have to take it back and say, like, you have to give a framework and you have to have these one-on-one conversations, coaching conversations with a person to say, where do you need to get to, and where do the business need you to get to kind of like have a two-way conversation about where's best to learn. And then that person, so if I was with you, Gary, and you said, I really want to learn negotiation skills to help me do better here, then I would say to you, right, when we meet next, what is your goal? Like, let's define a goal, what you want to achieve within, the next 2 weeks. And you would set that goal and hold yourself accountable for that goal, because I will be asking you about that goal. And then it's your decision to block out an hour in your diary to go, right, this is what I'm going to dedicate, because I know that for me, I want to get to this competency level, because it's going to help in your career and it's going to help the company. But mostly people are more motivated by what they can get for themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. That is going to get you somewhere in your career, and you're going to feel passionate about it because it's something that you really want, rather than the company dictating training on you because we need you to make us more money. That's not going to infuse you. It needs to be something that you go, this is something I want to do that's going to get a business outcome that I'm going to feel fantastic about. So it does need to be that you're involved in time blocking yourself and you see the purpose and the worth of that as well. And we're holding you accountable as a coach to say, right, now 2 weeks later, did you hit that goal that you wanted to do for yourself? And you go, yes, I did. And if you say, no, I didn't, okay, Gary, what were the blockers? Why didn't you reach that goal? And that opens another kind of conversation, but it needs to be owned by you, because the person, you are responsible for your own growth. And I think that that's very empowering.
Yeah, I think that's the sweet spot. People want autonomy and flexibility in how they learn, but they don't want to be unstructured in the way they do it. I think they do want that thing, let's sit down with my manager, work out the skills I really want to build and where that's going to be useful and how we measure that. And then do I have the flexibility to go away and go, look, I'd like to do this course or read this book, or can I find 10 podcasts, or can I find a person on LinkedIn I can say, look, do you have an hour to chat because I think you're really good at this one thing. So I think that's nice, that sweet spot between autonomy, flexibility, and having the structure to do it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about surveys there as well, actually. That's a really interesting point here. I think any of times people are rolling out these big initiatives, like, obviously, again, we don't know, but I would imagine in an ideal world, there's a good feedback mechanism in place. So people can say whether this, how many people said they really enjoyed it, how many people like this approach, how many people benefited from it and would like to see it again, how many would like to see a different approach. So I'd imagine that is happening. And like you said, it could be that, this is the first step and they're going to take feedback on board and then refine it over time. So the feedback point is interesting as well.
Yeah, I'd love to see the feedback, actually. And I think it would be really interesting to see if people are being truthful about it, because actually having a week to do this might be actually quite good for some people. But I think if you then did another survey to the managers of how many more problems have been solved or where people's competency levels have gone in skills, that would be an interesting conversation as well, to see, has it been applied? What was the outcome?
Yeah, and I think as well, the other thing is, I guess when you collect that feedback would be important as well for something like this. Like if we collected feedback at the end of every day, we might see a trend that over 5 days, people just feel overwhelmed by the end. But actually after 1 day of dedicated learning time, they felt really good. So it could be like this. When do you collect feedback is a key part of it as well, because you might go, right, the whole week doesn't work. But a sweet spot is if there was 1 day periodically where you're not going to get any distractions, go away and learn. And most people really like that. Then that could be a really cool way of going, this is how we refine it over time. And like all these things, it has to be business specific. You have to think about the context of your business and what is going to make sense for you operationally, but what are your people going to relate to? Are they going to enjoy this? So I think, yeah, anyone listening, I'd put that in as a bit of a reflection, like what would actually work in your company, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good point.
The other thing I wanted to ask very quickly as well is, I'm thinking about this from a personal perspective. If this approach was given to me, one thing I would be very worried about is my own kind of well-being, because we'll both be able to relate to this, but we're both pretty busy. We're doing a lot of things and it's nice you have momentum. You're doing well in these things. But if a week block was suddenly put in that, I would find it very difficult to switch off from the things I was already really in a good flow with, pick them up again in the future. I would have this ambient anxiety that in a week I've got to go back and pick up this project and I've got a week less to complete it. So I guess from a well-being perspective, did you have any thoughts on what something like this might mean for employees?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like you said, I think it needs to be the right time as well. So I think, like, I love my job. And when I'm in the flow of a project, I'm all for that project. And if someone was to say to me, next week, you need to stop what you're doing, do some training, which is that's just so irrelevant to me at this moment, because I'm learning all the time. I'm very focused and I know that I am. And then come back to that piece of work, I would be really anxious about that. And we've got to acknowledge that some people would be, and it doesn't mean that we're overworked. It means that we're really passionate about something that we're doing and we've set a deadline for ourselves of when we want that to be done, and then someone's just kind of interrupting that, not asking us when that's going to be the best time for us, but kind of saying you have to do this learning.
Yeah.
And also when it needs to be 40 hours and we're going to give you no context, for me that would create quite an anxiety, and I would be worried, like, if I come back, am I going to be in the flow of what I was doing? Can I, I'll have to make really quite detailed notes. So yeah, I think that's a big thing, that not just because it's good to have a break from work, and people do for holidays, but they choose when that is, and then that's their decision. And I think kind of giving the people that free reign, it's just overwhelming, Gary. Just go and learn. It's just really overwhelming anyway.
Well, I think it's like that. You mentioned having a week off. Like, think about how hard it is sometimes to get back into the flow of work after a week off of relaxing. Imagine you've been 40 hours deep in like video content for a week and courses, like, and your brain is just completely fried. Like, it's like trying to get back into the groove after holiday on steroids. It's even more difficult to do. So that's really interesting. And you made me think of one other thing there, actually. Timing and relevance. You might look at it on a by department or by location business, but you could say, typically our data shows that our sales team are quietest during this week of the year. And what you could do is slot something in there. So you're not necessarily going, everyone does it at the same time, but like marketing, we know this is normally a quiet point for you. Sales, we know this is normally a quiet point for you. Or, our London office, we know that like typically demand in this office is lower. So maybe we could slot it in here. So I think that's kind of another part of the why a blanket approach might work worse than something like targeted by team or location or whatever stage of career. And, we might have a week dedicated to people who've only been in a company less than a year, for example, or in their first job. I think segmenting it could be a better way to do this moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's very possible because, even in some industries, they're quieter in the months of August because everyone goes on holiday. And like you said, there'll be certain parts where more teams are quieter. So then 100% you could say, right, now is a time where we can dedicate some time to training, but not just go away on your own. I do think this blended in the flow of work or different styles to say, like, some of it's going to be go away and have a look at this course, now come back and reflect to the team on your findings, and someone else gives their reflections, and that's how people learn. And then how are we going to apply this as a team? Say it's a sales team, how are we going to apply this for a team? Are we going to change some processes? And I think you need to quickly put it into kind of what the outcome is so that everyone is learning kind of together. So it's this blended learning. That's how I think people learn best, is more a blended approach to learning rather than just one medium.
Yeah, that could be really nice. Imagine you're a sales team and you identify maybe one of your big points is we don't create enough pipeline. So you spend a week together doing this project to build your discovery or outreach capabilities, and then you're applying stuff together as a group as you go through it. Like, let's do a mock sit down and outreach call together. Let's all sit down for an hour and craft our best LinkedIn outreach message, like one that cuts through the 2 billion others people are getting every day. But yeah, I really like that. I think, that was something I wanted to end on, was a more positive note of what is the kind of better approach. Like we said, it's great that Slack are doing this thing. They've blocked time because we know time is the biggest barrier. But is there a way we could be more intentional and perhaps level this up and make it more effective? Any other thoughts on stuff we missed?
Yeah, and I think you need to realize that people are learning every day anyway. And I think for employers, you just need to be a bit structured and a bit more transparent on what your outcome, what are you trying to achieve? Is it because that we need to make more money and when we're not getting there because people aren't collaborating, and you want to know what that pain is? I think you need to say to people, this is the business problem that we're trying to rein in. These are our skills gaps. I see that for your role, we need project management, or we don't have project management skills, and working with people to say, like, how can we bridge this gap? And there's some great courses online that you can do, which is fine. And then, like I said with you, if I said to you, Gary, this is your goal, and holding them accountable for that goal, you would say, right, I'm going to put an hour in my diary to do that because I know we're going to talk about it next year. And I know this is important, not only to the company, but to me progressing, because everyone wants to help each other. But you need to be vulnerable and transparent to say, this is where we're trying to get to as an organization. And I think if you clearly communicate what you're trying to get, you might be surprised that actually your teammates will say, this is a better way of doing it. Or actually, I think the team can block out a collaborative session. I think we should involve these people because I think we'll get a better outcome. So I think it's all about outcomes and giving people a voice to say, how best can we do this, and giving them encouragement and support. But the time blocking is fine, but not a week of time blocking.
Yeah.
I think you need to be really clear on what the outcome needs to be for both the person and the business.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think, time blocking can work if you're being purpose and measured about it. Like, I think everyone who listens to this will be able to relate to blocking out time in your calendar to do learning, right? And then something better comes up or something more important comes up and you just write over it because you never had a real structured intention to do it. But if you say, I spoke to my manager this week. I need to get better at headline writing. And if I sit down and listen to a podcast completely about writing headlines for 30 minutes, and then I spend 30 minutes writing headlines, and I can go back to him and say, what do you think about these headlines? And this is the thing I learned from the podcast. I'm less likely to just delete the calendar block and say, next week, which we're all guilty of that. I did it the other week. I put a block in, watched this webinar, and something else overran, and I didn't watch the webinar. So it's still there in the ether to be watched. But yeah, I think that's the big takeaway. I think being measured, intentional, having a real clear goal of what's to come out of this. And then if you do use time blocking, at least you're ring fencing something intentionally. It's less likely to get written over. And I guess another thing as well, you mentioned, people are learning from other places. I think making that clear to people that you have the autonomy to go and find the best way to do it for you. And if that's a mix of a podcast or a webinar or a book or, whatever it is that you think, as long as we're providing that structure, that can be a really good thing to open up to people and say, it doesn't just have to be done in this platform, or it doesn't have to just be done with this content type. I think that's another thing I've taken away from this.
Yeah, and I think it's really underestimated, learning in the flow of work. And I you'll laugh at me, but I compare it to like the Karate Kid. And he's learning how to do karate by doing painting the fence and wax on, wax off. And he doesn't realize the skills that he's acquiring until Mr. Miyagi says, like, show me, this karate move. And I think at the end of the year or the end of the quarter, if you said to someone in your team, think about where you were 3 months ago to what you do now, what you've learned, and actually give them time to think about it, you'd be very surprised what they've learned. And there are things that they learn, they just don't know, because actually it's so natural that people learn in the flow of work and ask people. And when they're asking people for asking questions to answer questions, they're working on their skill of relationship building, they're working on their skills of negotiation. And I think if you pinpoint that actually you are learning all the time, and I think companies miss the trick when people say we're not learning, we're not developing, I kind of, as a head of HR, I kind of say, hang on a minute, you are learning. I've seen your confidence, or I've seen your level of competency increase over the last 3 months. And I want you to go away and kind of think about that. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I think you're right. When we're doing stuff day to day and all the time, we're too close to it to notice those improvements. But I would recommend to anyone, although it can be difficult, if it's something like watch a Loom video you sent a year ago, watch a demo you did to someone a year ago, go and read back an email you sent a year ago. There's more you do stuff over time. And if you are trying to improve those skills gradually, if you look at a year ago what you did, I look at some of the content I wrote like 2 years ago, I'm like, no way are the paragraphs this long. Like, what I've got better at is being succinct, because I've spent time looking at how the structure of copy should be. So when I look back at it and I go, how is there this much text in one paragraph? I can see not only that I've made good strides, I also can see I need to go back and re-edit some of that copy, which is added to the to-do list. But yeah, reflection 100%. Is massive.
Yeah, and you do take it for granted. Like I'm probably an expert at pensions, and I would never think that I would be an expert at pensions if I looked at myself years ago. But I know so much about them, just from experience of like doing day to day and answering queries, and then you forget because you think that's the norm. Well, it's not, because if you look at yourself a year ago, you wouldn't have known half the stuff that you know. So yeah, I think we should give ourselves more credit.
Yeah, that's the other thing. And actually, I'm glad I know that, because I've got, as a long-term job hopper until I joined HowNow, I've got too many pensions all over the place. So I need to block in and out with you, Pauline, to how do I consolidate all my pensions from all these different jobs? No, that's awesome. Pauline, I think that's a really nice note to end on. I just want to say massive thank you again for joining me. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'd love to know if anyone has any thoughts on this as well, and you can always connect with me and Pauline and drop us a message. So I'll just leave both our LinkedIns in the description, and you can connect with us there.